Well, I have a story to tell you, and that's why they asked me to come. So you ready to hear it? Yeah. What a nice crowd. I was born in a very small town, as I'm sure many of you were. This town was called Edgewater, and it was 20 blocks long and 2 blocks wide. It was right across the river from Manhattan, but it was a world apart. In our family, we had the most kids, and that was our claim to fame. We had 10 children, and we lived in the bottom floor of a 3-family house, and we knew we had the best floor because next door we had the backyard, or the side yard as we called it, and the other tenants didn't have that. That was our yard. My mother had a girls' room where the 6 girls slept. It was called the girls' room. I don't know why that seemed important to tell you. All right. And of course, I bet you could guess what the 4 boys in the boys' room was called. More importantly, my mother, Florence, and my father, Ed, slept on the Castro convertible in the living room between the rooms, upon which they produced 10 children. And that's the miracle. Okay. They were clearly good Catholics. Right? And that's frankly, I think, why we had so many children. Right? But my mother was probably, not probably, entirely the most powerful person I would ever meet, not just because she was my mom, but because she was who she was. She had a couple of traits that would weigh in on my head through my life that I wasn't even aware of as a kid. And the first was, of course, that she was organized. We had the most kids in the smallest quarters, but in our household, my mother ran it like a boot camp. Everything had its place. And to give you probably the most simple example, could you imagine getting 10 kids out to school in the morning and finding the right socks? So my mother, in short order, established 2 drawers in the kitchen. A boys' sock drawer on the top, which was previously a bread drawer, and the girls' sock drawer below. The boys were all navy blue, all one size. And the girls were all white, all one size. And so all you had to do when you got up in the morning is remember if you were a boy or a girl, and just grab any 2 and they were a match, all right? But that, I think, gives you a great indication of the way my mother thought. Everything had its place. And for anyone who goes into business and is going to work with more than one person, meaning yourself, you begin to appreciate how important organization is to building whatever you're working on. And so I had a great advantage in that I came out of the womb almost organized and out of the household, and I feel I could be dropped on any planet and organize myself out of or into anything, because it's just the way we were raised, all right? The most important trait my mother had, because I think we could have gotten away with not being organized in our family, but the most important trait she had was she was a wonderful motivator as a parent. And she had the most efficient way to motivate. She would decide on the birth of every one of her kids exactly what she thought their one gift was. I don't know what her formula was. I should ask her about it. But the fact is, she'd label you, and that was who you were for the rest of your life while you lived in her house. And so for my brother Eddie, my oldest brother a year younger, he was clearly, I see now, definitely a hyperactive kid and impossible to manage. However, my mother labeled him a born leader. And so when Eddie was in the side yard, starting to get out of line, my mother would shout down from the laundry landing where she was hanging her 8th load of wash for the day. She'd say, "Eddie, all the boys are watching you. You're a born leader." And he'd straighten out and puff up his chest and straighten out, right? A different method, but it worked. For me, my trait, she told me, was that I was extremely creative. She told me, "Barbara, you're so creative. You're so creative." And then in addition to the words, she put each of her children in the role of demonstrating why she was right. And so my mother, on a rainy day, would tell me to take 5 or 6 kids down in the basement. And she said, "Put on a Broadway show, include all the kids." And I'd go down fully confident that that was my role and I could do it. And so I would entertain and free babysit for hours down in the basement. All right? If it was a sunny day and we were out in the side yard, she'd tell me, "Go to the side yard and open up a rock store." I don't know what a rock store was, but soon the rocks became potatoes, the grass became spaghetti, and I was selling in little envelopes all kinds of things that we found in the yard. And we would be happy for hours. And so I was able to come in and think, boy, am I smart. It was I just felt like chosen, special. I'm the creative one. And so at home, I was so creative and loved and adored by my mother, and I felt like a hero in a way in my family unit. But at school, it was a very different situation. At school, how am I doing on this walking around? It's really weird. I've never done it. I've always had a podium and stayed stiff, you know? Okay, but I did look at my butt from behind last night, and it got lower. Sad, isn't it? Okay. Where was I? Oh, the bad part. It's got to be a bad part, because I'm painting around to these people, this happy story. You get the bad stuff. Okay. By the time I was probably 8, I had come to the conclusion that I was stupid. Not because of what went on at home, but because of what went on in school. At school, I don't know how your school was, depending upon your age, but in my school, it was a small Catholic school, and the way you were taught to read and write was to do it publicly.